I'll go ahead and call the meeting for February 7th, 2017 to order. And before we get to the agenda, which there's only one item on the agenda, remind people, one, that this is a work session for council. So because it's just a chance for council to have the opportunity to discuss items, as many of y'all are aware, under the Freedom of Information Act, we, as a council, we cannot come together and have discussion unless it be in an open meeting if there's more than two of us discussing. So this gives us a chance to talk about some ideas. It's some length. The thought was that we have, 3 council members that have been on council less than a year. Beforehand, in 2014, we went back and we started the process of outlining some vision for the future. And out of that, we came up with 7 different areas. And there they are on the screen, to focus on economic hub, a destination Bristol, foundation for the future, vibrant neighborhoods, outstanding city services, a healthy financial environment, and superb facilities and infrastructure. And while we talked about that as a vision, I think it's important for us as a council now that we didn't do this in the fall because we were trying to replace one of the council members. Now we have 5 council members. We now have a city attorney. These things in place so that we can look at what some goals, talk amongst ourselves and try to outline some goals and some priorities that will help us as we move forward over the next year and a half as a body. So that's the reason for this. And again, since it is just a discussion among council, normally during a regular call or regular meeting, we allow the public to comment at the end of the meeting. During the portion for non-agenda items, we allow the public to comment on anything before we vote on it. But since there will be no action taken tonight by council, therefore there will be no public comment. With that said, if you see something and you do want to comment, I'd encourage you to come back next Tuesday during our regularly scheduled meeting, and you can comment during the non-agenda items as well. And if you're unable to, people that aren't here can watch it as well. It's being videoed. So with that, I guess we'll go ahead and start. Anyone want to go first? I'd ask for some ideas.
Well, Mr. Mayor, first of all, I look forward to all the people here that are public employees that taxpayers spend money on coming back next week. And maybe plan in advance and let us know. Because you'll have your 3 minutes here, each one of you. You'll be questioned, just so you know. And we'll talk about the taxpayers of the city of Bristol, Virginia, so you know, straight up. And, what can we afford going forward? And I'll show you. I'll be more than happy to present to you things that you don't even know about, like the liabilities that the city owes to the pensioners of this city for millions of dollars that hasn't been paid. That's not in the $110 million worth of debt. We're going to talk about that. We want to talk about borrowing from the future to pay you today. And that's what we're doing. So you come back, 20 or 30 of you, you can parade up here in your uniforms. You can do your little thing like you always do in mass. And you can sit up here and you can justify yourself. That being said, 1. Number 2, Ms. Crowder, I want an opinion from our city attorney. I understand he was in a trial late today. I want an opinion on from the city attorney, please, as to how IDA has paid $60,000 in attorney fees plus $60,000 for a lobbyist when there is no authority in the city charter for them to be able to do so. And I also want to know, the public library for the city attorney has $10,000 per month in the budget. I want to see an invoice of every penny that the law firm that used to serve this city has paid out in library costs in the last 6 or 7 years. Every invoice. And if it hasn't been paid, Ms. Crowder, then why do they get $10,000 per year every year? I want to see it. I want to see it. I don't want your response. I want to see it.
I just have a point of clarification, just to make sure I understand. You're saying there's $10,000 in the library budget?
And the budget for city attorney for legal library funds.
But in the library budget or in the city budget?
In does it matter? No, I'm talking about city attorney. The city attorney legal budget that I saw with my own eyes is 10 grand. And I also want to know how they justify getting $60,000 a year to be IDA attorney when there's nothing in the charter that allows the IDA to hire an attorney. Okay? And if not, what do they do with the money? Why do they get it? And I want it paid back to the city. That way, the employees that are here tonight maybe will get some of what they deserve back. Okay? And maybe we can pay them. Instead of a certain few bilking and milking, let's pay for services. But we can't continue on with a joke at the falls, Ms. City Manager. We can't. We can't continue on with that. We can't continue hiding debt that everybody that lives in this city owes. Every one of you that lives in the city of Bristol, Virginia, and if you don't, shame on you for even complaining about what you make. Shame on you. But if you live in this city and you pay taxes in this city, then there's $20 million more. I can show it to you. And you know how I found out about it? From when I was in Smith County, from the treasurer of Smith County. So you know. $20 million that some of you are retired, some of you are going to retire, some of you think you're going to have your retirement taken care of. We're making payments for 20 years, presumed at 7% interest. That's what we're assuming, that we're going to get 7% on our money. Now you all, good luck. You can't get 7% unless you roll it in a casino and hope you hit it. And I'm sorry for you all. You've been lied to. Bristolians have been lied to. Now, we're going to have to face the day of making, there's 65, 70-year-old people out here that can't afford to keep paying you. They can't. And, Mr. Mayor, if I've said anything that's wrong or not true, tell me. But the truth of the matter is, the proof's in the pudding. Hidden in the budgets. Cleverly hidden in the budgets.
To be honest, as far as the retirement, I would have to see. I know in the audit it should show, because that's a new gas.
It's in the audit.
Yeah, but we haven't got the audit for this year yet.
It was last year. It was $23 million in 2012, Mr. Mayor.
And that was a new requirement by GASB that all localities have to show how far they funded into that. My guess is that compared to other localities, they're underfunded as well.
Smith County is $700,000, and Washington County is actually ahead, folks. So you know. I appreciate you, Mr. Hartley, Mr. Mayor, saying that, but no, Bristol is $20 million. Get this, Smith County is $700,000 plus in arrears. Washington County, Virginia, our neighbors, is ahead of the game. We are $20 million shortfall in retirees' pension monies. And yes, it's in the budget. And why wasn't it? We can only borrow, Mr. Mayor, up to 90% of the assessed value of the property in the city. You tell me how City Council was able to borrow $23 million for 140 acres, $18 million to level a mountain, $17 million to bring Cabela's in here, okay? And God only knows what else. And we had 30-some million in debt because BVU took. You listen.
You listen.
You're talking, we're here to talk about
We're
goals
telling
and
people the truth.
priorities.
Mr. Hartley, we're here to tell the people the
No,
truth.
we're here to talk about goals and priorities. You're
yeah.
talking about things that have already happened.
Oh,
you know.
you admit it, they've happened.
Well, whatever you're alleging is already happened. We're trying to talk about how we're going to move forward. You're sitting here making all these
We don't have any
accusations.
room to move forward, Mr. Hartley. We don't have any money to move forward with, sir.
You know, I
Don't
mean,
you ever bang that gavel on me again.
out of order.
Oh,
Listen, Doug, Mr. Fleener, I am tired of this. If you look,
you
we're
can't
here-
control a meeting. You're a politician, sir. You intend to run for Commissioner of Revenue. You're going to tell everybody what they want to hear. And the truth of the matter is, sir, you don't know what you're doing.
Mr. Fleener, let's
That-
get on with the meeting, please.
You know, I think I've been fair enough to let you sit there and rant.
I'm not ranting. I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling these people the truth. That's what you're supposed to do. Tell them the truth so they understand exactly the situation this city's in. You want to tell them and fudge it. No, and you said, I guarantee you if we look at every jurisdiction, that was your comments, videoed, your comments, and I told you the statistics. So we're 20 million that we didn't report when we borrowed this money, Mr. Hartley, and you can sit here and you can fudge it all you want to, and you can bang that damn gavel till the cows come home.
All right. Anyway, getting back to discussing goals and priorities. Does anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I'd like to mention that 2 years ago, we started on a cash buildup plan that was to go for 5 years with property tax increases. We're into the third year now. We have 2 more years to go, and each of those 2 years calls for a 2-cent increase in property tax or real estate tax. The reason we started that plan was because when I got on council, we had $2 million in the bank and a $60 million budget. So obviously, we were borrowing money, which that's the TANs, in case you're not familiar. That's the tax anticipation notes to pay our bills, not to pay debt or anything, just to pay our operating expenses. So the council decided to go on a 5-year plan at the end of 8 years. Now, 5 years and call for increases. After the 5 years, no more increases for that purpose. We maintain the cash that is coming in because of that money to get us up to the $10 to $11 million we need to actually operate the city and pay the bills of that borrowing money. So I would hope that this council will continue on with that plan. It's working out nicely so far. It's saved the city quite a bit of money. At the time, we were averaging $10,000 a month in interest on making those temporary borrowings. We've cut that down to $2.5, $3 million. So we're heading in the right direction, and it's not a tax and spend situation, it's a tax and save. We actually save that money and keep it in the checking account so that we can pay bills with that borrowing money. So I would hope that we would put this on the list as to continue.
Mr. Mayor, if I may address the citizens. Yes, I want to thank y'all for coming out tonight. Everybody knows that we're facing a very serious financial crisis inside the city. And I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again to y'all tonight. I really do appreciate y'all coming. We need the community input. But 7 people got us into this financial mess that we're in, and it's going to take 17,000 to get us out of it. We need y'all coming to the city council meetings, not hollering and screaming. We need y'all coming with ideas and solutions, because 5 people sitting up here is going to have to make some serious decisions here before long. And we need input from y'all, not in a negative way, but in a positive way. Emotions are running high, as you can see, and because we're facing some very difficult times, and it's going to take this whole entire community and the support of it to get out of this mess. So I appreciate y'all coming. Look forward to you coming back in the future with solutions. All right, thank you.
Mr. Hubbard, let me ask you this, sir. How much of a revenue shortfall have we had with Ruby Tuesdays leaving, Sears closing, and so forth and so on, projections? I know you've talked about our savings and so forth, and you want to increase this property tax. You're asking this council to increase the property tax again. before July 1, 2 more cents, if I understood correctly,
Yeah.
because 4 cents has been added, but now we're asking for 2 more cents. And what I'm asking,
Two more years.
2 more years, okay, okay. But how much of a revenue shortfall have we had? Perhaps Ms. Crowder would know this better than you, sir, but how much of a revenue shortfall have we had from Ruby Tuesday's closing, Sears closing, Tuesday morning closing, and God only knows who else is closed or businesses down? How much of a revenue shortfall beyond our projections, Ms. Crowder, do you know?
Councilman Flinner, I will have that number shortly. We had a budget meeting with the Commissioner of Revenue. He's the only one privy to those numbers, and so we've asked him to put together numbers for businesses that we know have left or have closed. Ball, of course, is on that list as well. In terms of revenue, we did receive personal property tax, machine and tools tax from them, and so that's a number that as soon as he provides it, I will provide it to the
Well, the only thing I'm asking for is sales tax revenues that have been lost from these businesses and restaurant taxes, obviously Ruby Tuesdays and so forth, and Tuesday morning in Sears or retails. I don't know how that works, but, obviously Ball Corporation they own the property. They're going to continue to pay for their real estate taxes and so forth. They're not a private enterprise, a charitable organization, so they have to pay. So I understood that.
They have to pay real estate, but you may not know that when they left the building, they took the equipment out, and so the
I understand. So they paid up until the time they left and
Right.
so forth and so on. I
It's
get
a
that.
shortfall in
So,
revenue.
so we need to know though, don't you think, Ms. Crowder? We need to know.
Absolutely, that's why we asked him to put that together as we're working on the budget.
It's gonna be good money, good size amount, in my guess.
Yeah, I'll just take a minute to tell you my perspective. So as I look at the city, I've looked at a lot of organizations through the years, lots of organizations that have been very successful financially, lots of organizations that have struggled financially, but figured out ways to get themselves out of the trouble. And when I look at the city, and I didn't know, what we were in and what got us here, but there has been some very, very poor decisions made up to this point. And pointing fingers doesn't get us there, doesn't matter who got us there, but there were some bad decisions made. That's a fact. So what I hope one of the goals is going to be, very first one, is these citizens are going to hear the truth. And you may not like the truth, but you're going to get the truth. So you better be ready to take it, because it is what it is. We're shooting with the facts. We're looking at the numbers. If we don't understand the numbers, we're going to ask that they be looked at harder, and we're going to look at them from every angle, because we're not going to let this financial ball keep getting kicked down the road. Ain't going to happen. So we're going to start managing the city. Should have been managed 10, 15 years
20,
ago.
30.
Right? You go back 10 years ago, they dropped real estate taxes. Why? Dropped them for multiple years. Why did they do it? Probably to make city council look good. We're not in the business of being looking good, right? We're in the business of running this city. So when you think about your position, and you don't have to be a department head, but you guys better get your teams around the table, and you better start saying, is our department managed properly? Is it managed with financial fiduciary responsibility? And if it's not, you better figure out how to plan your way out of it, because if you don't, we are. We're allowing the department heads time. That's why we've had these meetings. How do your departments stack up? Because we're trying to learn, right? We're trying to understand where the numbers are, what the metrics are, how they're staffed, what the dollars are. And there's going to be more questions. So it's
Lots
incumbent
more.
upon the departments to really understand your departments. And when we ask serious questions and you don't know, you just say, we don't know, but we're going to get back to you. But if you do know, I've heard some answers over the last several city council meetings. I'm going to tell you, it's a bunch of this. And that doesn't go very far with any of us. We don't have time for that, right? This city's got about 4 years and a glide path that's pretty steep financially to get us in the health zone. And if we make some very irresponsible decisions based on emotion and not what the numbers are telling us, we're not going to be in less trouble, we're going to be in more trouble, right? So I'm not looking for more trouble. I know where we're going to take this thing. So the first thing you're going to get is the truth. That's priority one, in my opinion, the truth. Whether you want to hear it or not, you're going to hear it. Number 2 priority for the city before we talk about anything else is financial management. Because until we understand what it takes to financially manage an organization in a city this large and to do it properly, all this other stuff is just wishful thinking. So our first priority and our only priority, we don't even need a number 3, is financial management. That's it. We have run our borrowing limit up to the max. So the good news there is we can't borrow any more money, right? Our bond ratings are down. So that entire financial picture has to be turned around. So what are we going to have to do that? First thing, you got to look at the top line revenues. We have asked the Commissioner of Revenue multiple times. Multiple times. We need, as a council, revenue projections. You cannot manage a business, you cannot manage any organization unless you understand the revenues and the revenue projections. What are our revenue projections this year? What are they next year? And what are they in year 3? If you don't know what the top line is, you don't know how the bottom line costs need to look to match up with those revenues. And we are not getting anything from the Commissioner of Revenue. And I wish he was here. Nothing. I'm completely frustrated. He's a constitutional officer, but basically he's not doing his job.
Amen.
He needs to project
Amen.
revenues for this city and do it tomorrow.
And just so you all know, let me interrupt you one thing. Let me say this, Mr. Mumpower. Our Commissioner of Revenue that you pay your tax dollars to, anyone that resides in this Commonwealth of Virginia and pays any taxes, including if you live in Washington County. If you live in Virginia, the Commissioner of Revenue, you know, rather than being at his job at 9 o'clock, he's carrying a protest sign with his wife in Abingdon, Virginia, against a political opponent. He doesn't agree with that particular party. Now, I got news for you. I called him out there 2 or 3 years ago. I'll call him out again. Mr. Mumpower's right. There's too many people that are lazy, fat, and don't give a damn about the people until it comes time for a paycheck. And there's one of your persons right there. And he's on Facebook. You want to look at it where he's up there protesting with a protest sign against Ken Cuccinelli, who ran for governor? He makes $70,000 a year, and he can't give the numbers to our city manager? Is that fair? Is that fair? It's not fair. But there's your good liberal Democrat, and that's 5 liberal Democrats that got us in this mess at the Falls. Period. But, you know, what can you expect? We've got a congresswoman that thinks that Russia invaded Korea. And we've got the Democratic leader of the House that says she can't deal with Bush. Bush hadn't been president since 2008. There's you some good Democratic leadership, folks. And that's why we're in the mess we're in. Democrats in this city. Period. Gimme, gimme, gimme. That's the mantra of a Democrat.
So back to the priority, it's financial management. It starts at the top line. It starts with revenue projections. Then it starts with what are we going to do to increase our revenues? So has any citizen in this city seen a plan of how we're going to increase our revenues? Are we maximizing the tax base? Are we looking at how we're going to get business in here? What are we doing to maximize our revenues? Have you seen a plan? I haven't. That's got to be part of the financial management. There has got to be a physically responsible revenue plan that says, here's our projections, and oh, by the way, here's what we're going to do to increase revenues. When you increase revenues, what does that mean? You got to create a business environment that makes businesses want to come here so you can get tax revenue base. You got to make people want to move here, right? So you got more people that have homes. So this is a long-term proposition. Doesn't happen overnight. But we're doing nothing to help grow revenues. We're not talking about it. We're not putting a strategy together. So that's very important. And the last thing I'm going to say about financial management, what you're going to see out of this council, I promise you, is financial policies. So what got us into this position was council was allowed to approve up to a borrowing limit should never been allowed by city charter. So we're going to put policies in place that's going to prevent that from ever happening again. We're going to make it so difficult that this city cannot exceed a threshold of borrowing without something like a unanimous decision and a referendum that it's probably never going to happen again. Because we're never going to go to 98% borrowing limit in this city ever again. So what's that mean? It means there's going to be financial policies that have teeth in it. So the charter of this city is going to change. We've already directed the city attorney to start reading the charter. We're going to look at how we're going to change that charter to put the teeth in this charter so we never get in the financial position we've gotten ourselves into ever again. We should never have gotten up to $1.19, $100, right, taxes for real estate. That's absolutely ridiculous for a size of town of Bristol, Virginia. But I can't blame Archie. He didn't, I mean, he's got some of the blame, but hang on a second. But you look at the numbers, you had to go to $1.19, at least in the short term, because you were borrowing money just to operate the city. But we can't stay there very long. We cannot stay at $1.19. The healthy spot for this city is somewhere between $1.05 and $1.09.
That's right.
That's where the city belongs, right? So what is that? That's about 10 to 15 cents on the 100, right?
That's right. Is it 100 or 1,000?
And that's
100.
100, and that's an easy number, right? What's 10 cents? It's $1 million, right? It's $1 million out of the city's operating budget. It's 10 cents. $1.5 million is 15 cents. It's easy to get there, but you got to get there, and everybody needs to understand the numbers. So if you want to get back to $1.05 to $1.09, we got to increase revenues and lower costs. That's the only way you get there, right? And it's not going to be a fun party, okay? There's going to be lots of discussions, but financial policy is going to go right along with it. And when we talk about financial policy, not only is the charter going to change to put teeth in what we do as a priority of this city, these departments are going to have the responsibility to manage their departments by absolute mathematic metrics. You have to manage your department to a certain metric that never allows you to get out of whack again. You can't wake up one day and say, why are we spending 30% more money than three cities our size? A business would go out of business in a year doing that, right? You can't do that. And there's not a single department in here that's immune to what I'm talking about. I've looked at every one of them, including the school system. Me and the superintendent already had a conversation about it. We can't sit here and have the number of schools we've got that are underutilized, and we're spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars hoping we can figure out a way to consolidate these schools. We have to do that. When I was at Virginia High, 1150 was the population of the student body. What is it today? 650. Every school in our system's like that. We're about 50% utilized. You can't afford that. And I know, I went to Highland View. I love that school. It doesn't matter though, folks. The city cannot support that kind of a school infrastructure. Imagine the dollars that that's drawing. So that's the priority. Every single department. The school system has to look at consolidation. All of the functional departments have to look at efficiencies and how you pull costs out. The fluff has to stop. And there's fluff. Everybody talks about, well, we've cut back. My mantra is you better learn how to burn the furniture. When you learn how to burn the furniture to keep the lights and heat on, then you're getting somewhere. Because businesses have to do that to survive, right? So when you think it's really tough in the city, there's a whole lot of businesses out there that's done it a whole lot tougher, let me tell you. And I'm not going to point the finger, but it was almost comical last year when I heard some of the council meetings about cutting one or two people. When I had just walked out of meetings and had to cut 28% of my department just so we could survive for the next 12 months cash flow and financially. And that's what every business does. So, you just gotta understand it is what it is. It's not emotional. We can only afford so much. And every department has to look very hard at what they're doing and do it better than you've ever done it before. Because we got 4 years, folks, to get out of this. That's when those general obligation bonds come due in a big way.
Well, and there's a difference between, and I'll say this too, Mr. Mumpower, and thank you for your comments. That's about as straight up as you're going to get it. It's going to be tough. It's going to be painful. And I will tell you this, there's a difference between what you want and what you need. And I will say this much, as far as charitable organizations and so forth are concerned, and volunteer organizations and stuff, from my perspective, mine, you know, when it comes to the Chamber of Commerce, for instance, and our contributions, and I'll say this matter-of-factly, I believe in Bristol, Rhythm and Roots, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to get and talk to you all a little bit about the numbers of Rhythm and Roots. I've got some interesting data to share with you at the appropriate time. Country Music Museum, that's wonderful if we're doing well, if life is good, if people aren't struggling. But I tell you, to the city employees here, those things are going to go first from my perspective. I don't want services cut to any citizen here. I've got a 90-year-old father, and the police department's been exceptional to my father when I've worried about him. You all are there all the time, and whenever I've had a question, you're good professional people. Firemen, same thing. So what we have to do, and I'll share this, you know, some of these organizations are going to have to learn to swim on their own or go away. Because I'm not going to cut, I won't vote to cut education, police, fire departments, public roads and so forth, people that maintain our highways and so forth. They do a hell of a job. The first thing I'm going to vote to get rid of is things that you want, but you can't afford. Square across the board. Visitor and Convention and Visitors Bureau, $180-some thousand is the city's share of that. So you know, $180-some thousand that we share equitably with Bristol, Tennessee, although Bristol, Tennessee is 2/3 our size. I wouldn't give them a penny, period. Rhythm and Roots, I can show you the free tickets given out. Free tickets. Left, right, and center. But we expect people to come in here from out of town and pay. Okay? That's not fair. That's not equitable. Country Music Museum, wouldn't have done it. Now that it's been done, it sinks or swim on its own. Because you know what? You all at work, you live here, you take care of our people. You're my priority. You should be everybody's priority. But everybody wants to take. Everybody wants a little bit for themselves. Think about it. Think about it. Instead of, you know, wondering about your jobs, wondering about your household income, think about greater good. Public service, it's just that, folks. It's public service. What is it worth to you to work in the city of Bristol and to serve the people instead of serving yourself? And that's all I'm asking you to think about. Not just yourself, but the greater good of this area. I guarantee you, a lot of you would say, I'd take a 50% pay cut to live here because the quality of life's good here. It's beautiful. And I'm just throwing that out because it is a safe place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. We have seasons here, unlike some places. And I get passionate, and I'm going to always be passionate because I hate where we are. It makes me cry. It does. And but I got to think about the future. Not just today. Thank you.
All right, anybody? Okay, a couple things here to add. As you talk about those outside agencies, Councilman Fleener, and I know that this will come up, but one thing to keep in mind is that, you know, to not look at those necessarily as expenses. Those are investments that, you know, when you look at meals and lodging tax, that's the return we get back from what the CVB does. Now, so that's something that I think needs to be in consideration when those are looked at. it's not just necessarily an expense, because if you cut that out, then you could drastically reduce a huge amount of revenue, and by the time it may not happen next year or or the following year, but by the time you realize that, it's going to be too late, and it's going to take even more money to build that awareness of Bristol and the marketing back up. So that would be my only concern there. Regarding, and I've heard kind of everybody, and I made some notes, and one thing when we said we were going to do this is I said we would meet for 2 hours and then stop. Because we could probably talk for days. But we will stop at 8 o'clock. But 3 things, and I think Councilman Mumpower kind of framed this right, is it all deals with finances. But I think there's 3 areas that we could talk a little more about and get into kind of some detail on how we look at this. One, of course, is revenue projections, and you mentioned, we need that data from the Commissioner of Revenue, and I think that's very helpful, and we need it to go forward. But the other thing is, you mentioned that, how do we grow the city and a plan? And I'll get back to that in a second. The other part, so that's, growing. Vice Mayor Hubbard mentioned the cash buildup, which that deals with a whole nother issue, not just growing revenues, but cash flow and cash flow management. And as he stated, when I came on council, we quickly realized that we're borrowing money just to pay our bills, that, the cash flow wasn't there, and that's slowly in a much better position, but we're not to where we need to be. And that leads to the third point, which is policies, and how do we get there? And that's, I think, the only financial policy we have is that we would try to shoot for in the neighborhood of 12% cash reserve, and that's the only policy that I'm aware of that we have. So if we could talk a little bit, about what might go, how we build the cash up, what might go in this plan, and some of the policies, I think that would help frame the discussion. And I'll just mention the plan, and anybody that has been to a meeting or watched them online, is every time we talk about economic development, we talk about, I've said that, for a whole host of reasons, that we need an economic development strategy. Right now, I don't
have one.
necessarily see one.
No, we don't have
I
one.
don't, what are we trying to do? How are we trying to grow Bristol? What is it? How do we use the incentives we have? What all tools do we have available, and how can we best utilize them? But until we even know what it is we want to accomplish, we don't know how those tools would work to accomplish that goal. So, that is something that as I say, the more I think on it, that needs to be a part of how you move forward, because if you don't know what you're going after, what types of industry sectors or whatever, then you'll just go after everything and you won't be very successful at it. And you need to go after things that are a good fit for our community, that make sense to be here, that play on some of the strategic and competitive advantages we have. I think if we could define industry sectors that we want to go after, we could talk to the school system, and they could start making sure that the workforce is trained for that. But if they don't know that you're, say, and I'll use this example because I know Wise County's moving that way, and the governor's mentioned cybersecurity. If it's something like that, then they need to know they can work with the students and make sure they have technological skills, coding skills, those kind of things. Otherwise, if that's the sector you're going for, because then they can do that. I know the community college is willing to help bridge that gap as well, but they need to know where that gap is. So I think if we could have that plan, it could help put some of those pieces into place and help us move forward a little quicker. So,
Mr. Mayor, I think what we need here in Bristol is jobs. We need jobs besides this. The city is the biggest employer, if I understand correctly, in the city. And what we need is jobs. Now, this is one, we've heard from public education for 20, 30 years, it's about the kids. I don't know where vocational education has gone. I don't know what happened to vocational training. When I was in high school, we had welding, we had plumbing, we had whatever. Now, I don't know how many of you watch the news. I don't know. But Donald Trump is going to put pipelines, agree for pipelines, one in the West Coast or close to the West Coast, and one, the Keystone Pipeline. And he said, I want to use American steel. He either wants to fabricate it in this country or create it in this country rather than getting it from China, shipping it over here, and putting it together here. He wants to do that. We have multiple, I don't know what the condition of the buildings are, but we have multiple old Bristol Steel buildings in this city. I don't know how much it would cost or if we could go to the legislature. I do believe that things that are going to happen at the local level, because if you start going up the chain, it gets screwed up somehow. So what we try to do here, it has to be here and force the hand up the road. Realistically, if we can retrofit and get some sort of aid or whatever and have private entrepreneurship, even bring back the textile business. We had a booming textile business here, Burlington Industries, multiple textile businesses where people earned a good living. Bring them back and allow government, have an incentive that they will help a private entrepreneur may start this business. We'll give them a tax incentive. The first $1 million they sell, there's no tax on them. Those are the kind of things outside the box thinking we need to have to employ our people. Welfare ain't good. Nobody here I'm sure believes that that's a good way to make a living. Wake up and watch Judge Judy and go to bed with, it used to be Johnny Carson, I don't know who it is now. Okay? That's not living. Living's going, Mr. Mayor, living is going and earning a living, paying your bills, contributing to society, raising a family. There's ways this council can do things, but we're going to have to think outside the box. We're going to have to change the way we've done business. We're going to have to think differently. Mr. Mumpire said, or I think Mr. Wingard said, glad you all are here. You know what? 5 people up here, or one as an individual, doesn't have all the ideas. I think that's an idea. We're going to have a steel boom in this country. Why can't Bristol have a piece of it? Why shouldn't Bristol have a piece of it? Now, and there's ways to incentivize it. There are vacant buildings in this city that can be retrofitted for textile mills. People can make $10+ an hour, more if there's incentives. How do you do it? Instead of giving everything away to big corporations, let's give it to small corporations and entrepreneurs here and employ the people here. Not just in Bristol, but Washington County, Southwest Virginia, East Tennessee. They're our neighbors. We need to work together. I've been arguing forever that Bristol alone is a small little island. Bristol with Southwest Virginia and East Tennessee is a big island. But we need cooperation, and we need help, and we need ideas. And that's my idea, to go to the legislature of Virginia, maybe the United States government, and say, let's have local government, or let's have local businesses start some industries here. Unless we're too lazy and too stupid to work a 40-hour work week. That's my suggestion, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I'm not going to necessarily disagree with you because, but what you said is you mentioned 2 things. And this is one reason I think we need plant. You said steel and textiles can make a comeback. I would like to see both of those do that. They were strong industries before. I'm not sure if they will. We don't know. But the thing is, which one do you go after? Is it steel? Is it textiles? I mean, how do you focus on what you want to be? And if it's both, that's fine. And then the question would be, okay, like you said, the old Bristol Steel, or I'll use the example of textiles that you drive by probably every day. I do. I think all of us may. Is Gordon Garment right down the street? But there again, the city doesn't own that building, so we have no control over that property. What incentives, what can we do to help someone, get into that building, get the equipment, whatever they need? That's why we need to look at the incentives and what tools are available to us and what makes sense. And this is why I mentioned the incentives is, we've talked about it before, is sometimes, I think we may at a certain point, how much do we want to incentivize a business or an industry? Because at a certain point, if you give everybody that wants in that an incentive, you're helping people that are competing amongst themselves. And I think you may be setting people up to fail or not helping them as much as you intended to. And those are, well, I say we need to really sit down and go through this and understand where we are, what we want, and I think that's what you're saying. And the other point I'd agree with too is as we look at it, it needs to be regional, and part of that is if we know what we want to do, then when we talk to and I think anything when you look at regional, I think it's more than just Bristol and Washington County, but I think anything would have to include Washington County because we're landlocked by them.
Agreed.
You move into the natural corridor up 81 of Smith and all that. But if you go that route, then, we don't have if you wanted a large facility, we don't have the available land in the city. So maybe the county does that. We get something smaller that's a vendor or something, but maybe that's our strategy.
You said that before, and I like that.
And that's where we need to kind of talk about that, because if we say, look, this is what we can do for this regional economic piece, then they can say, okay, here's what we can bring to the table, and then it does work to everybody's advantage. Because I agree with that. I mean, people live in the city, work in the county, live in the city, live in Tennessee, work in Virginia. So these lines,
Artificial.
People do that, and right now, I think as a region, what you're saying is right. We need to find things that people can support a family, that they can stay here, that will give their children a reason to be here. That's why, that's one of my main motivations, is to make sure that those opportunities exist for our children. So, but we're not going to get there if we don't have a plan. And that's why I say we need to start that process of working through it. And I don't think we're very far apart in that.
No, Mr. Mayor, here's the problem. We don't know. I mean, realistically, we have a city attorney, but he can't tell us what we can or can't do. I don't think he knows. And here's the thing. We have legislators that are in Richmond, and we have actually a federal United States representative who's in Salem. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had them down here and they were here to have a roundtable discussion what we can do? And realistically, isn't that really what the end all? Because we sit up here and we don't know. We don't have an industrialist on this council. I mean, realistically, we don't. But wouldn't it be nice to know what we can and can't do before we sit here and basically talk about it? And who should know is our legislators, the people we elect to do the job in Richmond or Washington, D.C. Once we know, and maybe there's some legislation that would come out of a meeting, a joint meeting. But we don't know. All we know is we've got a lot of debt and a lot of unemployment, and we need to put our people to work, and that's a fact. And is there any way, Mr. Mayor, that we could possibly do that?
Well, I would throw in that Virginia has already said if you don't do joint projects, meaning with other towns or other counties, you're not getting any money from the state of Virginia.
I know you've told me about that, the
Yes,
corridor project and
go
so forth.
Virginia.
Right, and wouldn't it be great if they could actually come here and explain exactly what we can do and the parameters of what we can do and so forth, rather than us say we want to do this and give people false hopes when they can shorten the cycle for us pretty quick.
So here's the point. So regional economic development is absolutely the answer. There's no doubt about it. Bristol by itself will not move a single rock economically by itself. Doesn't have the skill set, doesn't have the horsepower, doesn't have the leverage, doesn't have everything it needs to move the needle. Won't happen. So it's got to be done regionally. So I'm all about the regional development. But the problem, and the problem with all governments, we've been talking about this for 6 months.
Have done nothing.
We got to start doing something. I've talked to Israel about it. I've talked to Kilgore about it. We've talked to Carrico about it. These guys know about it. We talked 6 months ago, back in September. Has anything happened? Not a single thing. That's the problem.
The Go Virginia people are still trying to figure out how to do it.
What's Go Virginia?
That's the
Tell me what
project.
Go Virginia is. Does anybody here raise your hand? What's Go Virginia? Okay?
Please,
That's the
you get a
problem.
prize. You get a
Nobody
prize.
knows what Go Virginia is. So the state of Virginia has issues, right? They set up this A corridor and this Go Virginia. It wasn't set up right. It wasn't marketed right. It's not. It doesn't have the right charter. It doesn't have the right business skilled people in it, and nobody knows what it means. So it's just like this. It's
Well,
just this
they've had
organization.
meetings
that's
all
float-
across the state that people could go
My
to.
point is, it's
but not
not
knowing what it
getting
is
any
that they
traction,
go.
right? The
Oh,
point
yeah.
is, it's not doing anything for the region. So what they should do is stop talking about it and
Amen.
a new white sheet of paper and go, forget the A corridor, forget Go Virginia. We're going to establish a Southwest Virginia Economic Development Commission,
Amen.
and we're going to hire the best marketing seasoned executive we can to run it with 3 people underneath it that know how to recruit global manufacturers, right, and global businesses. And that's the only way it's going to work. And if it doesn't happen like that, and Carrico and Israel Quinn don't get behind it, it's never going to happen. We'll be talking about it 2 years from now.
Yep.
Right? Because Bristol won't do it by itself.
Oh, we can't.
Washington County won't do it by itself. In fact, you know the history. They've been doing their own thing for years now. But I will say the atmosphere today is probably the prime time to pull the two together. We got the right personalities, I think, on both Washington County and Bristol to talk through it. So now we can do it. Before they didn't even want to talk about it. So we shouldn't be talking about this in June.
Yeah.
We need to get some action going on economic development because it is a priority.
Yeah. Well, but definitely we need to do regional. We need to work with our neighbors. But to start with, we need to get the city pro-business. Our codes for businesses coming in here is anti-business. And we need to restructure and rewrite our code book. We'll let a business come in, but we won't let them advertise. Every time, we're shooting them down with signage. Our signage ordinance needs to be scrapped immediately. And there's a whole list of other codes that we need to start working on. Our city attorney, if he started working on them today, he's got a full-time job for the next 2 years just rewriting our codes. We may even want to consider hiring him a helper, a second attorney, or a legal assistant to help him get ahead of the game, because we have got to grow this economy.
Well,
And
Mr.
if
Wingard,
our codes, and I have not read through every bit of this, but I am a local business owner. And a lot of this is just to tell you what you can't do. And we got to get over that. We need to be encouraging businesses to come in here and get the brick and mortar going vertical and be a yes every time. Now, once we get a handle on our finances, then we can start tightening up a little bit on our regulations and what we really want and what we don't really want. But right now, we're in a crisis, and I don't care if it's somebody wanting to sell lemonade on State Street. We need to be offering them a permit.
well, Mr. Wingard, we have to admit this. I don't know what people out here in the audience, it depends on what media you watch. You may not like what Donald Trump's done, but by God, at least he's worked 2 weeks as President of the United States, and he's got in and he said, I'm going to change this, this, and this. So if you don't like that, and if you listen to somebody, we're banning Muslims or whatever, at least he's a man that gets in and does a day's work. Period, folks. Period. And you know what? This council talks a good game. We do. And I agree with Mr. Mumpire. 6 months we've asked for regional cooperation. And you know what I've heard? We can't get along with Washington County. We've tried this before. Okay? There's no way that we can possibly work with every town in Washington County, every town in Smith County. Smith County. You know what? We had people that had narrow-minded interests that led this city 20 or 30 years ago. And they had their own selfish interests that didn't want to cooperate with anyone. It wasn't in their best interest to reach across the city line or county line. And I can name you names. Nepotism is well and good with some of the people we've had in our past city leaders. Nepotism. In other words, you take care of me, I'll take care of you, you take care of my kid, and I'll take care of you. Now, you know, those days are over. They're over. And this council, right now, I know you don't like hearing and worrying about your jobs. I know you're worried. But you ought to worry about your neighbor. Are they working? Why aren't they working? You elected us, and I'll be candid with you, I've been disappointed in some of the people I voted for up here. You know why? We talk. Like to go to little dinners, shake hands, be seen, be a big shot. It's time for us to put egos aside. It's time to put selfishness aside, and let's work together, because there's no use us sitting up here talking about what we might do, because unless we have our legislators to explain it to us and what we can do, we're wasting your time. We're wasting our time. That's a reality. I'm not interested in wasting my time. Period. Life's too short. But if this council doesn't have the wherewithal to start talking turkey with Washington County, every town in Washington County, Smith County, coming together, bringing our legislators that are responsible to us, and that includes Campbell up in Smith County. You mentioned O'Quinn. You mentioned Kilgore. If we don't bring them together, find out what we can do, have a united front, then if you have children, they're going to fail. 4-year degree guarantees you nothing. Nothing. Hard work guarantees you something. This council, last chance to reach out, and we haven't done it. We've been dilatory, we've been lazy, whatever the word is. You can't do. How many times have you said, I can't do, and you've been able to do it? So, you know, there's no sense us talking about what we might do until we actually reach out and have a forum where the people around this area, the leaders, the so-called leaders, get together in a room with our people that we elect. We pay them money, and we see them, and like I've always said, our politicians, we see them at chicken dinners. If you're Republican or Democrat, you know, you see them at a little fundraiser, or they'll come to a meeting and they'll tell you their little 30-second spiel, and I'll remind you of Marco Rubio when he was called out by Chris Christie. After he got through his soundbite, he couldn't answer a question. Let's bring them in, like we bring our departments in, and let's see what we really can do for people, for a change. Okay? Because, really, it ain't about any of us up here, trust me. Any of y'all can take this place right now anytime you want to. I'll give it to you. Tomorrow. Okay? Tomorrow. I hate it. I hate it because I can't get things done. I hate it because I can't help you all. Because nobody wants to bite the bullet. We've got to change. If we don't, your family coming up, there's no future. And that's a fact. We'll be a third world
Let's talk
country.
about this economic development again, because what Kevin mentioned can't be brushed over. This deal of somebody walking in the 2 doors right there in the lobby that's got $1 million in their pocket, ready to invest in this city. What do you think is going to happen when that person walks through there? One, do they know who to go talk to? Do we have a process to treat them like they're the best customer on the planet? Make the process completely invisible to them tomorrow. In other words, it is the smoothest process they've ever experienced in their life. Do you think we have that? Has anybody ever went through the process here of coming in, trying to get a business license, trying to go through zoning and rezoning of your land for business? I mean, it is the biggest nightmare that you can imagine. Well, business people have no patience for that. You've got to make it like they are the only person on the planet when they walk in those 2 doors, and you hold their hand if you have to through every part of the process to make it as easy as possible, so they walk away and go, you know what? I don't care what you say about Bristol, Virginia, but that right there was the easiest process I've ever seen when I went to get my business license and to get what I needed to start a new business. And it's not that way. So as part of economic development, we've got to have some leadership somehow that drives the process has got to change and be smooth. And we've got to have a team that drives economic development. The Industrial Development Authority, years ago, today, is not going to make it happen.
Joke.
They don't have the proper skill set, they don't have the proper resources, and it's not regional. So that's going to have to change. Now, leadership could change that. You could have somebody on the IDA that steps up and says, by gosh, I'm going to be the person that makes a difference. Right? I'm going to be the person that makes the difference. We haven't had that. We're waiting for that. You know, you don't go out and force leaders to step up. They naturally step up, right? So we need some leadership on economic development. Who in this city, y'all know a bunch of people, I've thought like there's no tomorrow. Who in this city has got tremendous business experience and skills and maybe is retired and has the time and has the leadership and the drive to take this on and make it happen? That's where the citizens come in. That's what we want. That's what has to happen. Because if you don't, it's like everybody just sitting around wondering why it's not happening. Right? Because I promise you what, it ain't going to happen from this council. This council don't have time to do it. Right? It takes a dedicated person and persons on a small team to drive change. And we don't have enough people getting involved. I don't care. I'm just telling you the truth. There ain't enough people that cares about this city to make a difference. Because if you cared, you'd be making a difference. I did not run for this city council because I wanted to. I promise you that. My plate was 199% full. But I felt like I could do something to help out. Well, who else is going to help out? Who else in this city is going to step forward? We need somebody to lead economic development. We need somebody to help lead this financial policy discussion. Do we have bankers? Do we have accountants? Who's retired as a CPA? Who's retired that worked at a bank? How about 3 of you? Get together, get with our city attorney and the city manager and start helping us come up with all the financial policies. Because I promise you, if the city manager and the city attorney and the CFO have to sit down and do that on top of their full-time job,
They don't have time.
they don't have time. It takes dedicated skill sets to sit down and do this, because that's what we've got to have. You want to talk about what policies we need? We got to have a policy on borrowing limits. We have got to have a policy that says under no uncertain terms will this city ever borrow above a threshold of 60% of the max borrowing limit, ever. That's got to be a policy in the charter. And the only way you can undo that is with referendum. I mean, the city citizens vote it and say, we're okay for you to go to 70% because then you bought it off. So borrowing limit policy has to be one of the financial policies. The other one is revenue policy. We have to have a revenue policy that says our Commissioner of Revenue will provide not only revenue projections to this city quarterly, but he will also provide a revenue generation plan of how we're going to increase revenues, increase the collection of back taxes, and start to prop up the top line. So we need a revenue policy. We need a cost policy. How are we going to manage the cost lines? What's going to be the maximum cost that departments are allowed to have based on the size and the number of citizens that we have? So we got to establish a cost policy that says under no uncertain terms are you ever going to allow the cost of this department to go above X unless the city's population allows it or the city by referendum allows it to happen. Capital policy. Everybody wants to talk about it. Everybody's driving around with new trucks, big SUVs. You're right, it's wrong. They should have an SUV that rolls up the windows and has no radio. Right? That's what they should have, but they don't. Right? Well, you got to have a capital policy. You got to have a capital policy that says this is all that we will allow for these types of vehicles in this city. If it's a work truck, it meets these specs. If it's a police vehicle, it meets these specs, right? And once that's out there and it's public knowledge and everybody knows about it and it's in the policy, that's the type of vehicles the city is only allowed to buy those. So there's no complaining then because we've established the policy. A financial analysis and reporting policy. When's the last time that we have had a consistent report on the audit and the financial condition on a regular basis from the top line all the way to the bottom, right? It happens when we ask for it, yes, but there needs to be a policy that says here's the analysis that will occur on a regular basis and here's the reports that will occur on a regular basis, and that will be in the public domain, and you'll see it. And a policy that says here's how we're going to audit the city's financials. Here's the auditing firms that we're going to go after to audit the city. Here's the way and the specified way they're going to do the audit. Because if you go pay an auditing firm, guess what? They want to have your business next year. They're going to do you a really good job. They're not going to dig all the ghosts out of the closet because that's not what you're paying them to do. They want to keep you happy. And the way you get around that and make sure they do a proper audit that's responsible is you say, this is the audit you will do. You will look at this, this, and this, and to this detail. And they have to meet that when they do the audit. So we have to have a policy that spells out how the city will be audited. Not that it will just be audited, but how it will be audited in very intricate detail. And then after that is who has the authority to approve money flow through this city. If it's above $1,000, only certain people should be allowed to sign off on it. If it's above $10,000, only certain people should be allowed to sign off on it. If it's above $50,000, only certain people. We have to have a fiduciary policy that says this is the transactional responsible signature authority for this city. And if we put those policies in place as a priority, we'll never ever get in financial trouble again. And the reason BVU got in trouble, they didn't have a single one of these financial policies, not a single one.
Plus, they had a board that was stupid, okay? I'm going to tell you, and complicit, okay, to be honest with you. And Mr. Mumpire is absolutely right. And, you know, we're going to let you all hear information so you know we haven't had, unless we've asked for it, we have had no financials given to us since we've been on this council. There's an audit of 216 that we haven't seen.
Well, we've seen financials now. I
haven't eyeballed an audit.
Well,
Have you?
we've seen the financial execution for several months from the CFO, so we have seen that.
Well.
We haven't gotten the audit. That's a fact.
Well, 16 is out.
We haven't gotten
the
the
16 audit is out. The last year's
But
audit is out.
That's not the fault of the city. That's the fault of BVU has not finished
Well,
their audit.
Well, I'm going to share with you all some of the interesting people that have gotten money, no bids in this city when it comes time for budget. Good old boys, RFPs, okay? So you understand, no RFPs, but people have been given contracts, monies. You'll see it. You think if it's right, you tell me if it's right when the time comes, okay? But I haven't seen an audit. I found out there was even an audit in 16 from the, like I said, the treasurer of Smith County that told me we were $20 million in the hole for past pensions. That's where I learned that information. There was even a 16 audit out. And it's true. Look on the audit report, and it shows we're making a 20-year payment. And it's got one other category of other. It's got one $600,000 and one $200 and some $1,000 for 20 years to pay retirees' pensions that the city of Bristol, Virginia is behind. Remember when I said it? Unless you peruse the budget, which, like Mr. Mumpire said, you know, I have other things to do besides peruse a budget, but I found this out and looked at this. Reality is, y'all didn't know that, did you? People that are working for the city didn't know that we were in a hole $20 million on top of $110 million. That's a fact. It's not fantasy. It's a fact. And sometime, somehow, some way down the road, we're going to ask the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, to pick us up? Really? You think they can? When they're $1 billion themselves in the hole? No. So when you know, out in California right now, pensioners are having their pensions cut 40 or 50% in certain localities. So you understand. This isn't fantasy, folks. This is reality. Prudent management makes a difference. Just putting something over and passing it off as a budget, anybody can do that. We can get a 12th grader to do that. And we can get 12th graders up here on council to go along with it. That's what we've had for years. That's been our city. Okay? And, you know, like I said, anybody wants to step up to the plate, come on up. Take my place. But that's
So-
reality.
So as far as finances, let's make sure we're clear here. As far as the day-to-day finances and the month-to-month operations, if the city was in a crisis right now, I'd be down here every day, and I'm not. So the city's not in a daily crisis. They're not in a monthly crisis. We're paying our bills. We're getting the tax revenues in, right? We're meeting our budget. It's balanced, right? So what we're talking about is the city's functioning month to month. We're not having to borrow short-term notes to pay our operating expenses. That would be a really bad thing. But we had to increase the real estate taxes to do it. What we're talking about is to put the policies in place that keeps all this borrowing and all this really bad stress level that has put on this financial system in the city that caused our bond rating to go down, because you can call the next city council stupid or the past BVU board stupid or whatever, but you know what? You're going to get another stupid council. And I don't call it stupid. I just call you're going to get a council that doesn't have the skill sets for that. It's going to happen. 10 years from now, 8 years from now, it's going to happen. And the only way you keep the city on track is to have the policies in place. You got to keep looking at your policies and make sure they are can tight, so that the next city council and the one after that does not allow the city to stray. And if we don't do that, we're not doing our job as a council. And it's going to make people's jobs uncomfortable when we do that, because it's going to be a different way of responsibility from a financial standpoint.
Anything else?
Well, I guess I do have a question. Tabitha, Ms. City Manager, how are we looking right now with our finances? Are we able to pay our bills? Have we borrowed off of the TAN, and if so, when was the last time?
We have borrowed off the TAN. We've not borrowed off of it since July. Since November. We haven't borrowed since the new year. We paid it off in December. We borrowed in November. We do have a monthly finance committee meeting, and two of you all, the mayor and Councilman Mumpower, sit on that committee where we share that information on the monthly finances. On the audit, if I could just say, annually it's presented in December. It wasn't presented in December of 2016 because BVU is a component unit, and we are waiting on them to finalize their audit. And once that is done, and I understand, and correct me, Councilman Mumpower, if I'm wrong, but that's going to happen Friday. And once that happens, we anticipate at our next meeting, February 14th, having our annual presentation of our audit. So, but in answer to your question, Councilman Wingard, yes, we're paying our monthly bills. We have had to hit the TAN, but it's decreased dramatically.
I didn't know you never advised us of the TANs being, and that defeats what you said, Mr. Hubbard, of building up an escrow
I said
account.
we're down to about $2.5–3 million. It's all we're borrowing now instead of.
She just said we hit it in November of 16. You said we hit TANs November of 16 and carried it a month until we got our December revenues, yes?
We have to pay it off in December and June.
So
That's
we're
correct.
borrowing, so the escrow argument Mr. Hubbard has for tax increase is failed because the purpose was to not have to borrow short-term borrowing from the city because of the interest costs.
That's correct, but it's an 8-year plan. It's going to take 8 years with 5 years of tax increases, but 8
right.
years in total before we have enough cash to stop borrowing. We're on the way in that direction, but I did not say we had gotten there. I said that's where we're headed.
Okay.
So maybe give a perspective. How often were you going after TANs to keep the operating bills paid 2 and 3 years ago?
Well, I think it's more the amount. We
the amount and
were
the timing.
close to hitting $6 million, and I know 1.7 is what we hit the last 6 months. So that's where the decrease is.
So in just 2 years, we've gone to lengthen the time that we don't have to hit it right, after the first of the fiscal year. Because I think we were, if correct, even in the month of July, within that first month, they were already hitting it. So that we've lengthened the amount of time before we have to borrow and the amount of money we're borrowing. So, again, that's some of this stuff. It does take time to build up, and that I think it was Councilman Hubbard or Vice Mayor
We're trying to
Hubbard's point.
keep the pain as level and slow as possible. The ideal situation would be to go up 14 cents day one.
We can't do that.
But everybody would have gone insane, including me.
Yeah, we don't have that. We don't have that leverage to do that.
No.
So actually, we're borrowing, last time you borrowed it was 1.7?
No, the 1.7 was for that 6-month period from July until December. The last time we hit the 10 was in November.
What's the year-to-date total, the number of times, or the amount we have borrowed?
Well, for the fiscal year or for
Yeah.
the calendar year? I mean, we haven't hit it since then, so it's
Right,
at
so we're down to
1.7,
one
which was
side. Okay.
but it was paid off, and so now it's at 0 because it's every 6 months.
Okay.
That cost us a month, interest on that money.
Do you know what the rate is?
It's according to how much you borrow, and it runs between 10 and 20,000, but we haven't paid, I think, maybe 15 for the whole time.
You paying P&I or you just paying interest?
Paid it back within 6 months.
Right, it is paid off. So there's right.
And before you were borrowing $6 million.
Correct.
And
So the city's kind of in a unique position, like you would understand. There's only 2 times a year they collect the major portion of the revenues, right? Mid-year and end of year when the taxes are due, right? So you got to have the cash on hand to survive that 6-month time period, right? So we didn't have the cash on hand because the last city councils let that go dry, and so therefore we were having to go out on TANs and borrow short-term notes at an interest rate, which is costing the city money. So Mr. Hubbard and the other council said, we're going to raise the real estate tax rate up so we can start putting the cash in the account so we can pay out of that so we don't have to go out on the short-term notes. So there's a rhyme to the reason, and that's why that borrowing or that savings amount has to be healthy, right, in order to cover that time period. So you don't have to, you want to borrow to make your mortgage payment? Think about it. You don't do that, right? The city shouldn't do that either, so.
as I've explained it to people, to me, it's comparable, if you want to look at a household, to a payday loan. I mean, that's really,
It's a payday loan. That's exactly what it
that's what
is.
you're doing. So, and again, to understand, the importance, as you say, that this had been going on for a long time. The councils before had been told to not increase the taxes as much. I think it was 1 cent a year is what the Davenport had said. But, we have begun that process. And part of that, I think you were talking about with the bond and the rating agencies, is that is one thing they look at. And that's a serious, while everybody focuses on the debt, cash flow, and that is extremely serious. And when you look at municipalities that have financial problems, I mean, and if you read papers across the state and look at Petersburg, their problem isn't from debt. Their problem is from having a budget that's not structurally balanced, which means that the revenue projections and the expenditures, and they're using, they don't balance. They're using one-time money for recurring expenses, things like that. So this is something that we have taken care of. We've built up the cash reserve, which is Petersburg's, one of their problems is they couldn't pay their bills. So, again, we're making progress and steps in that direction. The bigger problem, though, that I think everybody keeps focusing on and looms out there is the debt. And again, part of that is it's structured to where in that period of 4 to 5 years that we refinance it. It was always designed to be borrowed short term and then refinanced over a longer period. that would be amortized to give particularly the development at Exit 5 time to get going, time for those revenues to come in. So that's one reason why the success of that is very crucial to being able to service that debt and then have additional revenue for the city. Which brings up a point that I know I've made, I think Councilman Mumpower, we've made different points in the last 6 months, but when you talk about the cash buildup, I think one of the things we need to look at is, for example, as we get into the budgets and next year, we know that Aldi's will come to the falls next year, that we don't take the revenues that come in from up there and put it into the budget to cover shortfall that may come from all the things that you were saying had left, Councilman Fleener, but rather we add that to the cash buildup. So one,
cover
it's increasing.
debts at the fall.
It's the money from as these businesses come online. One, if we add it to that line in the budget, it will build up our cash buildup very quicker. And then hopefully, by the time we get to where we have to refinance those notes, we have enough money in that line item that it would service the additional debt. So rather than take it and say transfer to reserve, we would say transfer to debt service.
Yeah.
So that we're making sure, because I think that, to me, and you talk about policies and doing things, that the public can see that we anticipate that these notes are coming due. We're being responsible and setting this money aside so that when the time comes to service that debt, we have the money in place, that we aren't taking that and it trickles in a little bit this year and a little more next year and a little more after that. So we increase this here a little and that there a little, and then 5 years from now when we refinance, we're hit with a big bill of now we have to pay this larger debt service. So I think if we do that, we can accomplish in a quicker rate and maybe even without the real estate tax what the goal of getting that cash buildup, as well as being able to service the debt.
Yeah, when you say 5 years we refinance, I'm not on that time period. We've got to get the city's financials in a position to where we refinance immediately. What do you think is going to happen to interest rates over the next 3 to 4 years when the economy starts to heat up? Mm-hmm. They're at their bottom right now. Yeah. We got 1 year to get these policies in place and show the bond rating agencies that we know what we're doing, so that they say, you know what, Bristol, Virginia's bonds are now at a higher rating, they're A+. Then we can turn around and refinance. We need to refinance in about 12 to 15 months. We cannot wait 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
I'll promise you interest rates will be 3 times what they are right now. They'll be 7 to 8%.
Yeah.
And we've got to assume that because they're at the bottom now. They have nowhere to go but up. And we can't afford to refinance at those rates.
Yeah.
So fiduciary management says we've got to get our house in order now to put us in a position to refinance as quick as we possibly can.
And I don't disagree with that, because there's two intersecting things that I believe you're right, that over time interest rates will go up. How quickly, it's a question, but they will go up. But the other thing is, if we went out, and it's going to take time to build up that cash reserve, to show the revenues that are coming in, to have either from those businesses, either contracts or actual stores open, and be able to show revenue projections. And, that's going to take some time. So if we don't, then we'll go out and borrow, and we'll pay a higher interest rate now because we won't get a favorable interest rate from the bond rating agencies. If, they have laid out what they want to see, and they want to see that the cash reserve is built up. They want to see with the falls that the stores are there, and the revenues that come in through the legislation that created the development of regional impact, or where we get the additional money from the state, that's beginning to flow. There's some other things that they are critical about the city, that it's much longer, about rates of poverty and things like that. But again, the things that we can control, building up that financial reserve and getting the business and the revenue in, once we can show that, I don't disagree that, you know, you would want to go back, but it's, if you go too soon, you're going to pay a higher interest because you won't get a favorable bond rating. If you wait too late, you're going to pay a higher interest because the interest rates are naturally going up. So it's kind of finding that sweet spot in the middle, and I don't know where exactly that would be.
Well, it's 15 months to 24, somewhere in that range. It's going to hit its stride if it's going to. It's going to take a year before anything Trump does really starts showing up. And a year after that, then things get cranked up. You're going to see the interest rates really start moving up, which has always been the case of business. Once business starts booming, interest rates go up because there's more and more people after money. So I think 2 years is a legitimate timeline for our refinance. But it's going, and this, what we've got here, I think is excellent, but it's not going to be done overnight. These policies and everything, it's a good idea, but it's not going to, they're not going to be able to write it out one time and that's the end of it. It's going to take a lot of time. I'm retired, I can spend the time, but the rest of these guys, it ain't going to be easy. So, and you say get somebody else to do it, that's great. If we can get some volunteers, we can't afford to pay anybody to do it. So it's.
Well, that was back to Kevin's thing. It takes
Yeah.
17,000 people to get us out of the
Yeah,
position
absolutely.
we were in.
We've got to
So
have
I-
some people step forward to help us on
Absolutely.
these issues because it's, you can't do it all at once. But we got to have it done, and hopefully in 2 years, surely to goodness, we can get it done in that time frame. But if we don't get volunteers, it may not happen at all. At least not in a timely fashion.
And I think that's the point too. You know, don't complain if you don't pitch in. Realistically, I mean, you know, it's one thing to come down here and complain about X, Y, or Z. But you know, if you don't pony up and pitch in and care, then in my opinion, you don't get 3 minutes at the mic. Why should you? If I want to listen to complaining, I'll stay home all the time. I get that all the time, you know, but I think that that's what we're trying to say. You know, don't just complain when it don't work your way or go your way. You know, volunteer to help us make decisions that we need to make. Because I tell you, we 5 people. You know, I think we need to change some directions of management and so forth in certain areas in this city. I don't think you can keep the past, cling to the past, and expect a different result. So, you know, my opinion is we need to, you know, look at the direction our management's given us, and you know, we'll be able to do that. But please, everybody out here, there's some smart people out here in this audience. I know there are. Because you sit here and listen to a bunch of talk from us for an hour and a half, you got to be fairly smart to even put up with that. But the bottom line is, you know, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, come up and help us out. Okay?
I would like to comment, I am in favor of refinancing this debt as quick as we possibly can, okay? But we got to look at the cost of doing business. And Ms. Crowder, I would like to request a cost of, that it's cost us to borrow money for the last 2 years. The penalties and the interest that we've paid over the last 2 years to borrow money and get these bonds. Because it's got to be in the millions of dollars the way that I'm seeing it in the budget.
And I'd like to see a copy of the contract too from the city manager. I haven't even seen that. I know that they voted her in July 1. I'd just like to see a personal copy of the contract if you would provide that to me, please.
And another thing, going back to refinancing, I've been trying to go through the code and the charters, and the charter and all the codes, but I'm a slow reader, so it's not going too good. But anyway, our code and the charter says that we can borrow money, borrow bonds for 30 years. Now, I'm going to ask the attorney for a legal opinion. He's not here tonight, but I'm going to request a legal opinion from the attorney. Is that 30 years the combined life of these bonds? Because this mindset of kicking the can down the road for 5 years, 7 years, whatever, and refinancing and just keep refinancing, we're looking at decades of debt. I want to know if it's a 30-year fixed, if we refinance a 5-year bond, the maximum that we can take that refinance out to is 25 years, the way that I'm interpreting it.
right.
Because the code says you cannot borrow a bond to do any project that the bond outlives the project. The project has to be completed, has to be viable, and you can't owe for it and it's in deterioration.
Well, when
And
you
with-
when you refinance, you actually kill that bond that you borrowed the 30-year bond on.
Okay, I want a legal
That
opinion on
creates,
that.
that
No.
kills that bond,
Because
now
that
you're
30
starting a
year-
new bond.
That
Good point.
30-year was put in there for a reason.
Yeah.
Because
long
we
as you're
can't,
killing
we
it
can't
off.
keep a bond going for 15 years and then need more money and then refinance it into another bond and carry that same 15-year on over into another one and end up 45 years financing
Yeah, that's
because
ridiculous.
we just keep rolling it over.
And I like a legal opinion too, Ms. Crowder, from our city attorney. When we borrowed the ridiculous sum of money for Exit 5, was we only had a cap of our borrowing limit. Were the pension liabilities the city owed, was that shown to the bondholders and so forth? Was that counted on the balance sheet? If not, why not? I want a legal opinion from our attorney if that should have been or was disclosed, and if it wasn't disclosed, why it wasn't disclosed, what exemption would pension benefits that are owed by the city be exempt from our borrowing limit? And Mr. Eads is going to have his hands full, I think, with getting us some opinions, because if that wasn't counted, why wasn't it counted? Because that means we over exceeded our borrowing limit probably by $15 to $20 million by my calculations. And,
It's all semantics.
no, when you
I mean,
actually pay it up.
the money's real, I'm just saying that how it's labeled is determine what the legalities are.
Well, debt's debt.
Yeah.
And it's either, if that was not counted, why wasn't it counted when we got in this debacle at Exit 5 and all this money that people's children are going to be paying back? Not me. I'll be home by then, dead, gone, when we're paying off this disaster. So I think we need an opinion as to why that wasn't disclosed. And if it wasn't disclosed, why? And that goes back to all our management at that ludicrous.
The bond people are pretty sophisticated. They're not going to take our word for anything. They want to look at it themselves.
Well, I understand that the accounting didn't require it up until a certain point in time. And, that's why it was on the audit, Mr. Hubbard. So, debt's debt. Retirees' pensions as much a debt as the Falls bonds is a debt. And was it reported? If not, we over exceeded our borrowing, period. And that is a significant issue. And it's damn sure not fiscally responsible by anyone that would allow it to happen. It's telling the people in the past, to hell with you. We're going to build Exit 5, we're going to spend $23 million in Exit 5, but the heck with the people that are retirees and their pensions. And they're expecting it. They're banking on it. So Exit 5, $23 million for 140 acres of crap was worth more than the city caring about its employees, is the way I see it.
And also, Ms. Crowder, I would like to ask the attorney for another legal opinion too, because the charter says that if you borrow bonds, that bond money has to go entirely to that project. And in the past, from what I'm seeing, it's been a practice of this city to use that bond money to pay the penalties to capture that bond. And I'm wondering if that's even legal.
That's a very good point, and that wasn't full disclosure either. Actually, out of the money we borrowed, $4 million went to our financial consultants, Davenport and the bond counsel and so forth. That's why they had to go back in and borrow the $3 million, because the people that were supposed to be taking care of the
That's
city
why
got
I
their
just
cut. They
asked
got their
this.
cuts.
That's why I just
Yeah,
asked this.
they got their cuts.
So now you see why we need some financial policies in place. So those questions get asked thinking we're going to go back and dig skeletons out of the closet. That's not the purpose of that interchange. you see now we've got holes in our policy. So if our policies had it that you cannot go out and obligate your city without making sure your retirement system is fully funded, as an example, and you had that in the policy, then you would never be talking about this. So our policies have large gaps and holes in it that led to us getting to this position,
I'll say this.
and that's got to be fixed.
If our bond, the people that bought our bonds weren't smart enough to look into our whole debt, which includes our pension, retirement liability, then we got a bunch of morons that bought our bonds. Okay? I mean, literally morons. And of course, it fits in perfectly with what we've had running the city. Morons. That's why we're here where we are now.
We see the people selling the bonds may not know our charter, but our charter says that the money has to be spent on the project. It may be other community and localities' charters that they can use that money.
That's why you had legal counsel that was supposed to show that. They're the ones that wrote the charter. They should have been able to interpret the charter, but obviously didn't, and nobody really cares. And that's how it seems right now, except everybody's out here looking to us to fix a mess that is a mess. And I think there's some issues that we need legal opinions on. I really do. I want to know. I want to know.
Well, I will say, while I'm not, preface this by saying I'm not an attorney, I won't give a legal opinion, but I would think that financing would be a part of project cost. So if you're talking about, bond fees, legal fees, the cost of borrowing would be built in to what you borrow. So I don't think that.
Not without full disclosure,
Yeah,
Mr.
but,
Mayor.
I mean,
Not without full disclosure.
anywhere you go to any financial institution to borrow money, whether it's your first time buying a house or whatever, you're going to have to come to the table with some money. In this situation of borrowing money here, it's 100%. The city's not put forth anything to borrow this money. And that's bad policy. We should have a certain percentage of money to invest in a project before we go seeking bonds to finish the project or to build the project. We should have something up front. You can't go to the bank and borrow money without a down payment.
But that's just not how municipalities function. I mean, if we had the money, why would we borrow? I mean,
Who's got $50 million? They borrowed the money for the falls, but they borrowed 100% of it. It was 100% of the financing that got Freddie Mae and Fannie in the tank because they loaned 100% plus.
So what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, is bottom line is, since you're a municipality, you don't do what a normal home would do in their own financing. It doesn't matter. You can indebt the people that pay the taxes whatever you want to, and there's no fiscal responsibility whatsoever, and no full disclosure whatsoever.
I'm not
That
saying
makes
there's
no sense.
Fiscal, responsibility, but there's no. You
Well,
wouldn't
we'll
pay
find
anything
out. I
down
asked for a
payment.
legal opinion, so
I've
we'll
never
find
seen that with any kind of borrowing program that I've seen, either for municipalities or like loans.
There are all kinds of
for
wonderful
non-
ideas if you have cash to implement them. And while it's a good idea to have, don't borrow the full amount, have some that you can pay out of your own pocket, you got to have something in that pocket first. Where does that come from? This is what we're trying to solve, to get something. So these kind of policies later on make a lot more sense than they do now because we have no money to do these wonderful things. So hopefully this is what we can do tonight, is get this ball rolling and start having that money. I noticed if a guy paid for a truck from us, if he bought it all, paid us all up front, he had 0 payments per month. But most people don't have that kind of money. They have to finance it. And that's what cities have always had to do. These huge projects, you can't expect us to have the money on hand. Having some, that's a good idea. But and the reality of it is, at least in our case, we don't, never have.
But even when he financed it, he
Yeah.
still had some money down. He had to put some money on the table.
That's true. But it's a different, banks look at governments different than they do an individual. An individual can't go out and force you to pay them more money for their product so that you can pay your bank, whereas the banks see the cities have the power to tax. Therefore, if the city can't make their payment, the bank says, well, you better raise your taxes to get that money. And so that's why they're not so afraid of letting cities have 100% financing, because it's not a wonderful thing to do, and that's not how you want to borrow money, but that's the reality Governments can tax to get money to pay banks back. Individuals can't. I understand that. I'm not,
And
We're way
that's-
past that
but-
limit.
but-
I'm not arguing that point. You're
Well,
right.
We're right to the limit, and that's the reason that General Assembly puts that borrowing limit on municipalities based on your real estate valuation, so that you can't go above that and get yourself more than, and that's the reason why.
Well, I'll go back to when we had a conversation a couple, 3 meetings ago, and the conversation came up that IDA was designed. What happened at the Falls, cities were prohibited by the Code of Virginia from getting involved. IDA was nothing but a straw man to allow the city to do stuff that the Code of Virginia said, don't do it in the first place. There's a reason they said government, including cities, don't get involved in private enterprise, private projects. And then they had to straw man the IDA.
Which was
Boy,
approved by
well-
the state.
Well, I know, but look at the council. They were on IDA, they were on city council, and they were on BVU. Boy, what a good little web they had then. And look what a mess we got today because of it. And by the way, the people out here, you know, instead of investing in sewer for our city and our kids in the future, we've got sewer that's 100 years old. But BVU won't pay, they wouldn't borrow to pay for your future of your kids and the safety of your kids, but the city of Bristol, Virginia can indebt them, period, and put every one of you in jeopardy. That's just how narrow-minded government is in any level. And we've lost our way, and you know, it's just, there's no answer here tonight. I just guess, Mr. Mayor, we're going to try to have a forum together at some point in time, make an overture. Perhaps the mayor would do it to our local jurisdictions to have a forum and invite our legislators. You know, maybe if we'll give them a chicken dinner, they'll come. You know, and have them come, and Mr. Griffith, our representative, and talk about what we can do to incentivize businesses, not just businesses, not retail. We've got all the retail we can handle. Industry for our future of our kids and so forth, and our people that don't have jobs here in the city. Can we try to do that, Mr. Mayor?
We could definitely reach out to them. You know, again, you know, you complained as well as others about the slowness. I mean, that would probably be a few months. Of course, the General Assembly is still in session, so, you know, it would be till after they're out of session and trying to arrange for that. I mean, I think it would be a good discussion to have. I would say, though, if you know, in the meantime, there's things that we can do ourselves. Like I say, look at what tools do we already have that we know we have. What do we want to come up with a strategy? Because they're not going to tell us the strategy. They might tell us, okay, here's what we can do for you. Here's what you're allowed to do. But I mean, as far as a strategy, I don't see them coming in and saying, you know, Bristol, you're going to be a textile center. Abingdon, you're going to be a steel center. You know, whatever it is, they're going to leave that up to the locality and the businesses to try to figure out what do we have, and that's where we need to have that conversation. What do we have that already exists here that we can build off of? What advantages do we have that other communities don't, between the rail line and the interstate and some other things? Where are the opportunities? And if we can start seeing where that is, then it starts focusing that. So if we were to have the meeting you're talking about, then we would be ahead of the game. I mean, I think we could walk into that with saying this is kind of the direction we're going in, and it's much easier for them to help you rather than just coming and saying, we need help. You know, I mean, if you're taking some initiative on your own and you know what you want, you know, I think it's much easier for them to say, yes, we can do this, or no, we can't, or here's how we can help you get to where you want to go. But that where we want to go is the part that we need to talk about and see what makes sense for this community. Where are the opportunities? You know, and I'll give you an example that it's not necessarily for us, but a few months ago, the Airport Commission came and they talked about very focused on one industry sector, you know, aviation, and how, you know, you're not going to get the Boeing, but you might get some suppliers or some things. And that's where, you know, they didn't just come up with that overnight. They really sat down, they looked at what can we do here, what makes sense to do here, where are our strengths, what can we build upon, because there's certain things already here. And that's kind of what we need to do as a community. And, you know, so that then when we sit down and go talk to people, they say, okay, this is where you want to go, we'll help you get there. And I mean, again, I think it starts with understanding those things of you know, what are the tools we have, what are the advantages we have, what makes sense. Because if you don't, you're just looking for anything that'll come. And if you do that, you're not going to have nowhere near the level of success. And I think the other thing, if we could do that, it makes it easier for us to, as I say, work with the schools, work with existing businesses, that we can then communicate that strategy. And again, it doesn't have to be rigid and inflexible, that if somebody came and said, I want to do this, but it's not really here. I mean, we could still work. If it fit and we could make it work, we could. But, you know, you don't, it helps you focus and get to where you want to go quicker than just trying to go after anything. And I think that, so we can work on the other, but I think in the short time, and I don't know if that's something that help with the staff. Ms. Crowder, you had a comment?
Two, just I want to make sure you all are aware that the Southwest delegation does have a plan to hire an economic development person. You may have saw the report on that, to work for the region. We had a government relations meeting this morning at the chamber. I know the mayor couldn't attend, so I went, and Delegate Oakwin, Delegate Pillion were on the phone and giving us an update on that, their frustration with the statewide VEDP, you all, Virginia Economic Development Partnership, and how it's not done what it should do for Southwest Virginia. And so that's the step that they're taking as a budget amendment, which would hire somebody, actually it would be $500,000 from VCETA and then $500,000 from Tobacco Commission. So the $1 million then would go toward hiring people, and then to market the area. And so that's something that they're working on and also that, you know, the General Assembly wants to, based on the report that came out for VEDP, there's going to be a lot of changes in that regard. Also, just want to make sure you all are aware that March 1st, the community college is doing a summit. They're calling it an Economic Development Summit. And the reason I mention it, it's for Bristol, Washington, and Smith. They hopefully you all got an invitation. But one of the topics on the agenda is Go Virginia, and to talk about that initiative that came out last year but didn't receive any funding till this year. So.
Yeah, I signed up for that.
I just got my invitation today. So, but I mean, that may be the opportunity once this legislation passes. They may even begin to call people together as a region to explain, here's what this means for you. How can you fit in? But again, if they have one person looking to market the region, and we can say, you know, here's what we have to help you sell, and the tools we have, and here's what we think fits with Bristol, then that makes that person's job easier. Whereas, you know, he's looking at these other counties and it's like, bring us whatever you can get, we'll take anything. I mean, so, you know, when he's out talking to people, he can say, this would be a great fit here because of all of these reasons. That's where I think doing our homework, and I don't know if that's something that how that process would begin, if it's something the staff could initiate or start, or how we move down that road.
Yes, you know, we had talked about doing we can do a meeting with you all, we could do a meeting with the IDA, or we could do a joint meeting to talk about the strategy. That's certainly something that needs to be done for a lot of reasons, and that's something that we were trying to get together later this month.
Okay. All right. So there's some movement on that. And then the policies, I guess we can discuss then or later, but you know, and I would think some of those may already exist regarding the audit or borrowing or signatory authority. I know some of these don't, like the borrowing limits and things like that, but some may exist or be part of the statutes, the way things work.
That's correct. The staff is working on some financial policies, and, you know, when I have my new CFO, we'll certainly, and we have the new city attorney on board, we have some drafts, and those are things that certainly we'll bring to you all and as a starting point.
Okay. And then, I guess of course, there's all the things that people wanted legally, I tried to make notes of, but the last part, it gets into that cash buildup, is as we get into the budget to probably looking at that, like I say, trying to set that money aside, which I think would accomplish the goals that the vice mayor had laid out, but also make sure that we're in a healthier position to begin to service this debt. And I think that's, you know, one of those things that it gives the public confidence that they can see that there again, we're not just sitting back. We're trying to take steps. It takes some time, but we are trying to move forward and get these things into place. So, okay. Does anybody have anything else?
I'd just like to say I've heard a lot of good ideas tonight. I appreciate this. I think it's been very helpful, especially like my ideas. But the others were excellent as well.
Well, does anybody have anything else? All right, well, and we actually said we'd take 2 hours, and we finished 10 minutes early, so.
All right.
I'll call the meeting adjourned.